Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off what you were saying there, you were talking about one, the power of choice, and I feel like a lot of people don't feel that there is power in their choice. They feel like their circumstances are kind of controlling what options are available, and you just start to discover these new options that are brought to the table once you start doing a little bit of that soul searching and a little bit of that contemplative practice as you were talking about. And I feel like, I mean, I don't want to say the majority of people, but the ones that do start out on that path and quit, um, I feel like they start to realize that they their choices or their options, when they start doing that self-contemplating, they start thinking about the negative connotations of their self. Like, what was it?
Hmm.
The first phase of individuation, right? Young has you, face the shadow. You have to realize the facade that you were trying to convince yourself that you were, in order to realize, your own shortcomings that you can improve upon. And I mean,
Right.
that's such a painful experience. I mean, and I feel like it's an experience that we kind of go through periodically, and we have to, because you have to challenge yourself if you want to grow.
Yes.
Uh, but I mean, I feel like once people get to that first stage where they're just kind of realizing how powerless they have tried to convince themselves that they are in making these decisions and kind of dictating their life, that they don't realize, or that they think that they're not good enough to do that, or they don't have the talent to do that, or if I could have only done this, but I didn't have ABC, whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
But once again, a lot of the times, well, I guess, to get the root of what I'm saying here without rambling on too much longer, is that we don't value our power to make a choice because we have suppressed a lot of insecurities about ourselves that we try to
Yeah.
ignore.
Yeah. Very well said. I think that that is very true. And yeah, and I think it's important to ask ourselves why we do that. Why do we mistreat ourselves essentially in those ways? And a huge part of that is it goes back to things that we learned in childhood about what we had to do to make the best of whatever childhood environment we were in. And even if you're raised in the most idyllic kinds of environments, you're still a small child who is in a subordinate position to these. If you grow up in a two-parent family, to
Mhm.
these two giants, right? To a child, they're giants, and they're incredibly much more informed and intelligent and powerful in so many ways. And it's natural for us to feel intimidated by that. We feel secure in a good, healthy home environment. Those giants can make us feel very secure and encourage us and support us in lots of ways. But that doesn't negate the automatic natural instinct we have of recognizing that we have to get along with those two giants,
Right.
and we have to cooperate, and we have to kind of find out what it is that makes them happy so that we can be safe and secure. And safety and security, of course, is something we haven't really talked about yet in the equation of
Yeah.
happiness, but it's certainly significant.
Well,
So
it's the base of the hierarchy of needs, so it's got to be done.
exactly. Yeah. So we have got this very instinctive level of insecurity that you were talking about, to use that word that you were talking about. We've got this very basic instinctive level of insecurity uh, that about our experience with other human beings that has driven us to make decisions about what we should and shouldn't do, and what's okay and what's not okay, what's right and what's wrong, about all of those things, that is based almost entirely on how can I make the best of this situation with these two giants rather than what is it that I really want to do. And there's developmental value in that. It teaches us discipline.
Mhm.
We learn how to uh, consider our actions and how they affect other people. So I'm not saying that's an entirely bad scenario, but it does have these consequences that stick with us for the rest of our life. And in particular, this consequence of always kind of considering our own good in terms of the people around us.
Yeah, I feel like as we get older and as we develop, I feel like that longing for approval of those two giants is, what we kind of use to project on, different societal norms, right?
Mm.
So I feel like, a lot of that is what will determine our behavior or how we, perceive certain things. But, I feel like when you primarily if you're someone who's never really gotten that approval, right? You come from maybe a one parent household, right? You never really had that, I could only, talk about like from a father to a son, but like you've never really gotten that approval from your father. You may have had surrogate father figures, but you have that longing for that approval, so you're going to seek that approval elsewhere, and it's just never going to give you what you're looking for, seeking it elsewhere, whether you're seeking it through any a sort of community group, right? And or possibly even in like your profession, you're going to try and find that approval elsewhere, but you're never going to get what you want in regards to that. And I guess kind of seeking that, um what do you think that I don't know, how do you think that reinforces that idea of security, like just being accepted within like a certain group with certain norms, or do you
Uh,
think it's more involved with the parental relationship?
I think we do transfer a lot of these things from our our relationships with our parents. I think we transfer a lot of those things then into the other relationships that we have that we start to develop in life, in puberty and adolescence, and then into adulthood. We transfer a lot of those same things. We Instead of looking for parental approval now, maybe we're looking for the approval of our spouses.
Right.
And again, not that it's a bad thing in itself to get approval, right? The problem is when that becomes the standard by which we judge what will or will not make us happy, and whether or not that's a good thing for us to do. And when it transfers onto a group, Jung, since you brought up our buddy Carl Jung, um, one of the things that he talked about is that when we get involved with a group, that we can actually start to substitute the group's identity and the group's progress for our own. There's a couple of reasons for that. One of those is that it just kind of seems easier, right? Instead of really working on myself and being conscious and going through all of the difficulty sometimes that self-awareness and self-regulation requires, I can just adapt to what the group norms are and play those things out. And then if the group is happy and the group seems to be making progress in whatever its goals are, then I feel happy and I feel like I'm making progress.
Right.
But Jung points out that if you take that individual and you pull them out of the group, they regress right back to whatever state they were in before they joined the group. And you can see this, for example, in the religious revival phenomenon, for example. When people go to a kind of revival experience, they get all excited and kind of filled with the spirit of the moment. Um, they renew their commitment to God or whatever, and in that moment they feel like they're cleansed and freed from all of their sin, and then the very next day there they are, they're back in their life doing exactly the same things they were doing before the revival. No real change has happened in their lives at all. They were just caught up in the group mind and identifying with it in the moment.
Yeah.
And while it feels good in the moment, that's not really truly a source of happiness.
I feel like that's what makes adolescence so important is that, when we're in that adolescent stage, I mean, if we're doing it, I don't want to say doing it right, but, if we're going through that as adolescent stage and you're really testing facets of your identity, you jump from social group to social group, kind of testing out different parts of yourself. You find out what the norms are in one group. You jump to another group. You find out what the norms are in there. And, I guess going back to that shadow, that's where it begins, right? We
Mm,
start to suppress those things that, those different groups don't accept about us until
right.
we kind of, find something that we think is going to be socially acceptable. But, I feel like a lot of people, when they get to that point and they don't want to dig deeper into that shadow, that's when that group mentality will come in. And I forget, oh man, I forget the name of the book. It was a Jungian book. It was really good. I think it was called Facing the Dragon. It is
Mm,
basically about self grandeur, and one of the things that he had identified in there, and I'm gonna have to dig up the book and put it in the notes down below just because I don't have my source in front of me.
uh-huh.
But he coined this term. It's called self-objectification, right? When
Hmm.
you get into a group and you allow those group dynamics to determine your identity, you are just objectifying yourself into what that group wants you to be. And
Yes.
you can, I mean, it happens with religions, it can happen with any community group or any social circle, right? I mean, you've all met those guys that you went to high school with, right? They're still hanging out every Thursday at the same bar that they go to every single Thursday with the same group of like four or five guys. They become stagnant, right? They don't really
Yes.
challenge themselves anymore.
Yeah, you're right. And it has a lot of parallels to addiction. That people use their groups the way they would use a drug. It's an escape from the responsibility that we were talking about earlier of self-awareness and self-regulation,
Mhm.
self-determination, self-direction, all of those things that can sometimes be really hard work. I mean, a group identity can offer us escape from those things because our attention's not turned internally now, it's turned into the group, turned toward the group. And we can ignore what's going on inside of us if our focus is always on the group and just adapting and playing out, reflecting, mirroring what the group presents. Um, that's a that's definitely a kind of escapism that has a lot in common with chemical abuse.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like nowadays, primarily, and not to veer off and get too political, but I feel like that's the issue that we're having with politics these days, and it's just being exacerbated by social media because you're getting those little endorphin rushes from whatever outrage article the algorithm fed you, and it's just entrenching you deeper and deeper into that self objectification to where you are just your entire identity is based around the support of one candidate.